When most people in, say, mass culture think of Masters of the Universe as a property and are asked to name some of the female characters, there's pretty much three that come to mind. The Sorceress, Tila, and She-Ra. They're the ones from the 80s that everyone remembers. Well, Evelyn, of course, but as far as iconic heroes, these are the three that pop out to the top. Well, there's a lot more heroic females in the brand, and most of them are in the world of She-Ra, Princess of Power, and all of her allies from the Great Rebellion on Etheria, which was part of the Princess of Power TV series, toy line, and board game. And while these were really exciting characters, we was iffy if we had the rights to put them in the Classics line. We'd kind of already dipped our toes by doing Adora and She-Ra and Catra got in there, but it was a little murky whether or not Mattel at the time had the rights to put extended Princess of Power characters into MOU Classics. As the brand manager, I was really determined to do this if legally we could, because I knew it was really the one chance to do a toy line that had all MOU characters. It had Princess of Power, New Adventures, He-Man, and everyone could be in the same scale, in the same articulation, and work together. Well, for good or ill, we got them in there, and we did finish Vintage Princess of Power. Sort of kind of stuck it in there, and it was a choice of who to do. Do you do the Peacock Girl? Do you do the Tentacle Lady? Well, actually, we definitely didn't have the rights to the Tentacle Lady at first, because she was only in Filmation. We really had to focus on characters that had a doll in the original line. So, our next venture into the POP world was Frosta. She was a major character, sort of an A-lister from the Princess of Power TV series and toy line, and doing her in classics was really, as Obi-Wan says, your first step into a much larger world. Previously, we had done Adora and She-Ra, Catra, Hordak, but we hadn't really done any of She-Ra's supporting cast. And Frosta was the first character that really broke that boundary and communicated to the fan base that, yeah, we were going to get to the POP girls. So why Frosta over, again, Peacock Girl or Mermaid Girl or Bee Girl? Well, while some people think of her as a bit of a, an ice bitch, well, she's the character who actually melts He-Man's heart. In fact, this scene in the POP episode where Frosta sort of gushes her crush all over He-Man created more variants of He-Man's face, like more animation variants, than had ever been done in like every episode of Filmation previously. It's like one scene. I think there were like 22 face variants they created. And I always thought that was really cool. And I was like, that would be cool to, be able to see that in toy form. So, yeah, my liking of that episode, whether She-Ra blesses it or not, is why Frosta wound up being first. Of course, there were other collectible reasons, too. The fact that Frosta is one of those characters that has almost more variants in the vintage line than any other, especially because of all the international releases, differences in hair, differences in accessory color, white, blue. There was a lot. So she's highly collectible. Plus, she's also a female Iceman, and I love Spider-Man and his amazing friends. And the fact that there's a character that can ride around on ice slides that's not Iceman, hey, that was pretty cool with me because, what can I say? Spider-Man and his amazing friends was on when I was very young and burned itself into my mind. And I tend to like all ice characters, and I think that's also because I grew up in Connecticut where we got really big winters every year. So if a character controlled ice, a character was related to ice, a character was made of ice. Well, maybe not made of ice. That would melt pretty quickly. But the point is, it was a big part of my play as a child, was playing in the snow, and I used to bring my action figures out into the snow. So, I could actually have Hoth in my front yard and would bring out my AT-AT or AT-AT, as we called them back in the day. And snow became a big part of my imagination-based play. So, yeah, Frosta got bumped up because I liked that she had a cool appearance in the show and caused all those He-Man face variants, and I liked playing in the snow as a child. Oh, plus she, totally has Batman's cape, which is kind of funny. Well, like a lot of figures in Masters of the Universe, and, well, a lot of people who collect the Masters of the Universe Classics line, Frosta had issues. And a lot of that was related to how small of a line MOU Classics was. I mean, really small, especially when you compare it to things like Fisher-Price, Barbie, and Hot Wheels, which are the ones that move the stock price. And this is why a lot of things slip through the cracks, because we were doing a lot of figures very quickly with very little resources compared to a traditional Mattel line. And it's why things like Roboto had reversed shoulders. We were working so hard to make sure the gears worked that got overlooked. Same thing with King Hiss. He was a figure that came out as two designers, Terry and Bill, switched, and it got overlooked. Well, unfortunately, Frosta was another victim of this sort of slipping through the cracks, and her gloves were swapped, so she had, some arm issues. It's one of those things that you don't always notice. I mean, it is. It's harder to notice even than the Roboto and the King Hiss issue, but I had sworn up and down that this wouldn't happen again after Roboto, and then it happened with King Hiss, and I swore up and down it wouldn't happen again, and then it happened with Frosta. Believe me, this absolutely was the kind of thing that kept me up at night. As a collector myself, it really did pain me to put out anything that wasn't top perfection. And it was very frustrating, especially because we really couldn't get the resources to fix it. We actually proposed doing a Kingdom of Eternia royal coin that we were going to give out to fans as an apology item. The problem was it turned out that this was going to take up a SKU. So if we did this coin, it would have meant one less figure. And so we kind of scrapped that idea. But this is what it would have looked like. Terry actually did design it using the glyphs from the orb holder. The other issue that Frosta had was her color choice. So Frosta is essentially blue and white. And the white that was chosen for her final look was something a lot of fans were disappointed with. So you can see the figure on the left and a custom paint job on the right where her hair was brightened and the white on her outfit was more white, was brightened to be a true white, if you will. And I can absolutely explain why this was done. So obviously when we were doing Frosta, we looked at a lot of reference material. We looked at the way she was shown in Filmation. We looked at what her vintage toy looked like and what white colors were used on that. And we even looked at the style guide, which of course didn't have a PMS for her white, only the blues. That's always helpful. So I guess they just assume it's white. Either way, the reason that she didn't get bright white was because design, and honestly, I back them up on this one, felt that when you do a figure that's all white, that's not decoed, and this K-3PO from Power of the Jedi is a perfect example, the figures can look cheap. They basically, he's got very little deco on him. His whole body is just cast in white plastic, as opposed to being painted. And Bill felt that if he used this color white and didn't paint it, unlike every other MOU Classics figure, Frosta would really stand out. So the idea behind it was to actually prevent her from looking bad. But it turned out fans felt that this white, the sort of the dullish gray white that was used, actually did make her look worse. And it was like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Bill was really going for a figure that was going to blend in with every other character and not stand out as being unpainted. And unfortunately, especially when you contrast it with things like She-Ra's outfit, it just didn't work for a lot of fans. And they wanted us to remake her. And unfortunately, that wasn't in the cards either, because again, such a tiny line. And really the reaction we would get was, hey, fans are lucky to be getting this at all. And I hate saying that, but I did hear several people say that when I brought this complaint up in terms of both the white being off color and the arms on the other side. I remember I was even in a meeting and I made the comparison that we as Mattel would never let something like a Ferrari in the Hot Wheels line ship if, the windows were swapped or the door handles were swapped. And I was frustrated that we were allowing Frosta to ship in this way. But I was basically told, hey, this is a tiny line and we really just don't have the resources. And that was that. So I did go to bat for her. I really, really did. And it was frustrating. But hey, we got to have Frosta, and there is a point to be said that we did get this figure at all, because one, it is definitely kind of iffy whether or not Princess of Power figures could have or should have been allowed in the Classics line. I'm not saying we snuck around legal or did anything, unseemly, but it's definitely one of those gray areas, and we just kind of went forward. We ran everything by legal. They saw all the character lists. We were just basically never told, don't do this. And until we were told to stop, we when we went forward. I don't know if it was because maybe legal wasn't sure which characters belonged to which faction, or again, it was just such a tiny line that sort of the falling through the cracks scenario happens both ways. It allows things like the reversed gloves to wind up going into production, but it also allows things like a character like Frosta to get made when it might have been a gray area whether we were allowed to even make her at all. So, see, it kind of does work both ways. But I did really go to bat to try to see what we could do to either fix her, go back into production, or make things right with fans. In the end, we got Frosta, and in fact, we got all the POP girls, and she was the first step into that larger world of really diving deep into She-Ra's allies, and I'm just so glad we got to do that.